Cloud. Alrighty. Maddie, are you cool to just start accepting people as they come in?
I'm not a host. I made you a host, so I don't. How many? Yeah, if you just hit admit all, they'll just start coming.
Oh, yeah. They're coming through. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll have heaps of other people slowly coming through, I reckon, in the next 5 minutes, but I think we should get started. So, welcome everyone to the Sonar Pathways in Architecture talk. Today we have Dave, Graham, Mike and Simon here today to talk to us about their pathways in architecture. I won't talk too much, but thank you guys so much for joining us, and you guys will learn a lot more about the kind of cool stuff that they get up to in architecture. So yeah, I'm Reem, I'm the Vice President for Competitions and Events, and welcome everyone to Pathways in Architecture. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional land of the people in which we are all meeting on today, all from different parts of Australia and maybe internationally. And I'd like to acknowledge any people here today who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Yeah, so, and guys, so today the way that this will be running is we'll have individual presentations from each of our lovely people here today, and then we'll start a Q&A session afterwards. So if you'd like to have a paper and pen on hand and write down any questions you have as you're listening to the conversation, please do, and we'll have time for those after each presentation. So Dave and Graham, would you guys like to start?
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Hello, everyone. Today we're coming to you from Ghana country, and
then it's sort of
sorry. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I think we'll start by just sort of talking about the timeline and maybe our pathway is slightly different, but Graham and I are co-directors of Studio Graham and co-founders. We actually met in first year at the University of South Australia. Our surnames being Bickmore and Charbonneau. We were grouped together, so we had no choice but to be partners in an assignment, and from there we pretty much did every group assignment together and formed a really close relationship. I think we always discussed that we were keen on starting a practice together. In 2008 we actually did some private work, I guess, while we were still graduates, for some family friends. And in that year, I also started working at Hassel as a student of architecture. From there, we graduated in 2009. I was still at Hassel. Graham joined Hayden Charlie. And then I guess from there, we were working at big practices. And it's one thing that we quite often do recommend to students when we speak to them, in that working at a big practice, I think for us was really kind of positive experience, and it teaches you a lot about the kind of professional practice and the kind of, I guess, the technical aspects of documenting and running projects, which we still apply to our projects today. I think we'd always intended that our practice we would do a lot of residential work, but as we talked to you today, our path kind of took a different kind of direction, as Graham picked up a kind of private job in sort of 2011 or 12. So I'll let him speak to that in a moment. 2013, Graham completed a project in Indonesia called Motor Mexicola, which it was kind of at the infancy of Instagram and became the most Instagram bar in the world, and was kind of a catalyst for a lot of hospitality work for us. It also coincided with the small venue license, which was established here in SA, and the small venue license was a way of kind of unlocking or removing red tape for small operators to enter into the hospitality scene, essentially removing the issues or barriers that the likes of big pubs and casinos would put up for liquor license applications. In 2014, we started Studiogram, and it was good timing given the arrival of the SBL and having a little bit of hospitality experience. We also picked up our first project in New South Wales called Hotel Harry, or Harpoon Harry, as it's also known. In 2015 was one of the first hospitality projects that we delivered here in SA, and now almost 9 years on, Studiogram's grown to nine people, and we work across the housing, hotel, and hospitality typologies across our presence of 4 states of Australia, and in Indonesia as well. We actually, interestingly, whilst I worked for Hassel and Graham worked for Haynes Charlie, we both worked on Adelaide Oval and at various stages, and I guess this was a project that we both cut our teeth on, and had quite different experiences. I think I started as a model maker at Hassel and worked on kind of a lot of the kind of wind testing on the roof geometry. So obviously quite a different scale to what we work on now, but one of the kind of niceties of working on public projects like this really is that, you know, you can, if you ever want to go back and visit projects, you just got to buy a ticket, and the same applies to our hospitality work. We always say it's really nice that, you know, if we ever want to go back and experience a venue, all we've got to do is make a booking.
So on screen now is Motel Mexicola. So this was kind of, in a way, the project that kickstarted Studiogram. It wasn't officially delivered under that name because I was kind of working independently at that stage, but it was a pretty fun project to work on, and really was the catalyst for coming into hospitality. So I had left Haynes Charlie and was kind of trying to convince Dave to leave his job at Hassel, and we were really keen on some residential work, and we were doing kind of I had a small project in Norwood that I was working on at the same time. But I guess eventually the kind of success of this project and that kind of Instagram fame that became of it got us a lot of kind of I guess visibility in the hospitality sector of work, and we started picking up more and more work in that space. So yeah, we always kind of talk about how we accidentally fell into doing hospitality work, and it's become something that we love. You know, we always joke about how, you know, if your clients own bars and restaurants, they're probably not bad clients to have. It's a pretty fun kind of, you know, meeting place and venues to kind of go back to, and you can always have a good time. And as Dave said, they're open to the public, so it's something that you can continually go back and see how it's evolved, how people use it. Where in the residential work that we do, you might be able to go back and have a glass of wine with the client, but you don't really get to kind of spend time there and really understand how people use the space and kind of adapt it to their needs. From there, we grew into Hotel Harry, which was a kind of interesting project. It's right in the kind of edge of Surrey Hills, kind of on the border of Surrey Hills and CBD in Sydney, and it's a heritage listed pub where we refit 2 levels of hospitality, and then on very, very tight budgets kind of did 22 hotel rooms above the existing pub as well. So it was kind of our first push into that kind of accommodation game, which we kind of see as the natural progression of the work we've done in hospitality in the residential space. The hotel component that we're doing a lot of work in now is kind of the culmination of those 2 typologies. This was pretty early on, so we used to do a lot of festival work, which kind of came a little bit through our existing relationships in the hospitality space, and it was also I guess it was really fun for us. It certainly wasn't work that was financially rewarding in any capacity at all. In fact, some of them came with no fees, but they came with perks. So The image on the left is the Red Bull stage at Splendor in the Grass. So we were engaged by Red Bull to kind of curate, design, and then project manage the site construction of their stage for 2 festivals in a row. This was the first year at Splendor in the Grass, and effectively it came with no fee, but we got put up in Byron Bay for a couple of weeks. We got all access passes to the festival, so we kind of got our fees back in kind, I guess. And then Lola's Pagola, which was the kind of heart of the Adelaide Festival, was meant to run for more than 1 year, but unfortunately due to some construction, we kind of lost it after a year, but we had a lot of fun doing that project as well. And then these projects are coming more into, I guess, that announcement of the SVL. So the top image on the left is a project called Cranky Fins, which is in Palm Beach in New South Wales, for the same client as Hotel Harry's. And probably worth touching on that one of the kind of really interesting things about working in hospitality is if you kind of maintain good relationships with your clients, there's typically ongoing work. As opposed to our residential work, not a lot of clients, I guess, build multiple houses, but most hospitality operators don't stop at one. So if you maintain a good relationship with them, there tends to be ongoing work. So that was for the same client as Hotel Harry and Motel Mexicola. And then Cucci Deli Parwana on the bottom left, Africola beside that, and Mr. Goodbar on the top right. They were kind of our 3 first Adelaide projects that came off the back of that small venue license Dave was speaking about previously.
A lot of these projects that are probably a little bit more kind of colourful were done in collaboration with MASH at the time, and James Brown, who we continue to do work with today. These 2 projects really kind of signify, really, I think what we kind of set out to do with Studiogram, and that was to kind of create a practice that didn't have a house style. So this is Abbots and Kinney and Osteria Lodgy, and they're actually side by side here in Adelaide, and we like to think they have a completely different kind of aesthetic or kind of approach. We like to think of our work as very narrative driven, so each of the kind of hospitality venues really relate back to a story that we set up in the outset of a project. This was really our kind of first major residential project that was for one of our hospitality clients that we continue to do a lot of work for. And then this is just kind of, I've included some images of these 2 projects being Thousand Island and Sunny's. A slightly different pathway that we've decided to take with our practice is that we traded essentially our design fee for sweat equity in these businesses. So now Graham and I have, I guess, a financial interest in both of these projects. Graham alluded to kind of this move towards hotel work, which is Hotel Indigo here in Adelaide, which is kind of starting to be I guess a really kind of important and large part of our practice now is the hotel work. Fugazi here in Adelaide, it's kind of like a new kind of level, I guess, for hospitality in Adelaide in terms of opulence and kind of material. But I thought it was important to kind of show the diversity and aesthetic across these hospitality projects, which is really intentional and probably comes back to the fact that Graham and I get really bored of doing the same thing. And this is our latest residential project. Again, just trying to show this kind of diversity and the different kind of approaches. I think not all practices need to have a consistent style, and for us, exploring new material kind of techniques and approaches is really interesting, and we're constantly trying to learn and learn lots of lessons from project to project based on different types of material techniques.
And this one is RK, so probably our most recent hospitality project. Again, a bit of variation, probably a completely different approach to detail. So we are quite, I think the one kind of line you could draw through our work is probably our kind of obsession with detail. And this project kind of follows that line, but in a completely different way. So instead of kind of seeking perfection out of the detail, it was more about working really closely with every kind of tradesman that touched this project about kind of finding the joy in the imperfections. So it was, like that joinery unit's made out of old sleepers that we kind of dug around to find. So we wanted a certain level of decay, and then they were built using chainsaws rather than kind of you know, typical joinery equipment, but it was really about exploring this idea of imperfection and how you can kind of create kind of beauty out of the imperfections. So that was a kind of learning curve in itself.
I thought we'd just finish on this project here, which is the cellar door in the Barossa Valley that we're currently working on. I guess as you know, as we've matured and our practice has grown, our kind of scale of work is pushing into other areas that are still closely related or tied to hospitality. So this one's currently waiting. It's just gone out to tender, hopefully starting construction soon. So that's a very quick snapshot of kind of 8 years of Studiogram and 13 years since graduation. And this is our team now. So yeah, I guess we out of our team, there's kind of one interior designer. The rest of us are all trained in architecture, but we all kind of work on interiors and architecture, and there's no real kind of silos within our practice. But yeah, that's us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely insight into what you guys do. It is, all your work is really lovely. I've been to Arca recently, and for God's sake, they're absolutely beautiful. And so yeah, you are masters and gurus in what you do. So I guess I'll tell people to start putting their questions in the chat if you have any questions for Dave and Graham. I know you guys do also have to leave very soon. So I guess the big question, let's say, if we want to pick out of all of them, is if a student wants to follow in your footsteps and go down the path of that really lovely hospitality work, small scale to medium scale, and kind of follow the path that you guys took, do you feel like you touched on a little bit, you know, work in big practice and then go and work together, but what's the big piece of advice that you kind of give to someone looking to follow in your footsteps?
I think the big practice one is a pretty key piece of advice. I think, you know, there's something, I think a lot of students, and we were probably guilty of that too, we have this kind of, you know, this idealistic view of leaving university and starting your own practice straight away, or leaving university and working at that kind of practice that has 1 or 2 directors and it's a really small practice and they do this really kind of intricate, beautiful work. But I think the reality is, you know, the big practice has the ability to kind of support graduates and support them in the way that they need to be supported. The reality of moving into practice as a graduate is you are quite green. You do require a lot of kind of support in terms of learning and progressing. And I think the kind of networks that you can create in big practice and the rigor that they put into their work is the kind of skill set that's really important. And it's a really hard skill set to get out of small practice. So yeah, I think the kind of side note to that is that probably any job is a good job. So I think a lot of graduates think that they need to start working at their kind of, you know, their dream architect role, but working on any kind of project under guidance is going to be invaluable to your kind of experience moving forward. It's probably less important to work on your, you know, on world's best project as it is to just work under someone who's kind of a registered architect that knows what they're doing, that can teach you the kind of appropriate way to move through the various steps of a project.
Totally, thank you. Dave, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think with some of our earliest projects, I guess we well, as a practice, we earned very little money, and quite often we're on the tools building them or sourcing materials for free from Gumtree. So you know, you do have to do the hard yards at the start. But the benefit of doing hospitality projects, if it's a pathway that someone wants to take, is that you turn them over very quickly. Like we, in the early days, we were on those smaller projects, we're turning them over every sort of 16 to 20 weeks. So you quickly build a portfolio of completed work. So it does help you establish a small practice and get some runs on the board, which is not always easy with bigger projects or residential, which, you know, sometimes take 2 or 3 years to get the first one completed. So
No, yeah, that's very insightful. Thank you, guys. Simon and Mike, do you guys have any questions for Dave and Graham?
No, nothing from me.
I mean, yeah, so good to see your work. It's really impressive stuff. I've one of my mates I graduated with, actually, he worked for an interior architecture firm. And he talks about the process on site is completely different to an architectural contract. You'll kind of walk in with perhaps an elevation and a plan, and you work it out on site with the builders. Is that your experience as well?
We probably take a large scale practice kind of mentality to small fit outs even, and we probably over document. So like even on a fit out project, when it goes to tender, there could be upwards of sort of 60 drawings, you know, that kind of goes through the detail. So we probably have found that because we approach them as architectural projects rather than interior kind of fit outs, that there's probably a lot more rigor in the first instance. But having said that, because Graham's got much more of a kind of construction background, you know, working as a carpenter in Canada before kind of coming to Australia, but we probably do lean on kind of, we work very closely with the contractors on site. So whilst we might document things, we're very much open to hearing their ideas, because quite often they know how to do it better.
I think certainly early on, like when we were rolling projects over really quickly, like that Cranky Fins project that was on one of our first slides, I pretty much lived at Palm Beach. The client had a boat off the coast, and I used to sleep on the boat and go to site every day. And I was literally hand sketching like the bar detail, and the next day they'd start building the bar, and then I'd start working on like a booth detail that they were going to build once they finished framing the bar. So it was very much a kind of, yeah, there was like a really sketch level floor plan that we started with, and then everything else was worked out on site between me and the builder. But that was, you know, certainly not how we run our practice today. But in the early days, it was exactly how we did it. And it was, as Dave said, it was key for us to kind of build a portfolio, because some of our, you know, good friends of ours who went into practice around the same time that were doing kind of all residential work. It took them 2 or 3 years to get anything on their website, and we had like 20 completed projects basically within that same time span, because of just how quickly you rolled them over.
Thank you, guys. I guess I am looking at time, and I know you guys need to leave very soon. But can you leave
for a little bit if there's any more questions? But yeah, if not,
yeah. If anybody has any quick questions, put them in the chat. But is there any last kind of piece of advice that you feel you want to give to students? Like, it's the last piece of advice.
Last piece of advice.
Or maybe even a piece of advice that you got as an emerging architect that kind of stuck with you.
I think it's just about, it's important to stay true to who you are. You know, there's so many different pathways, so many different types of projects that you can work on. I think it's really about finding your fate once you leave uni. And I think, you know, don't turn your back on opportunities. Like there's so much, Dave and I never once discussed or thought about working in hospitality. So it was a complete, you know, a friend of mine was working on Mexicola, James Brown, who we mentioned previously, and he contacted me because he's an art director and kind of said, I've been offered this massive project. I have no idea kind of how to do the architectural component. He's just about kind of mood boards and all the artwork that's in that place. He did all of that. And I, you know, on a whim, took an opportunity and did that project. And so that's how we kind of accidentally fell into this hospitality game, and we absolutely love it and probably wouldn't change it for the world. So I think no matter what you think is your direction, probably be open to opportunities, because you never know where it might lead you.
Thank you so much. That's a fantastic piece of advice. We really appreciate yourself and Dave, you know, taking some time out of your busy schedule to speak here. So yeah, thank you so much again.
No, thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. Now let's move on to Simon. Would you like to start? Would you like to go next?
Yep.
And everyone, remember, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or even later during Q&A, just turn on your microphone. Yeah, thank you so much, Simon.
No worries. You've got that?
Yep, that's all up. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right, yeah, so I'm joining you from Naarm, Melbourne. I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Woiwurrung and Bunurong of the Eastern Kulin. Today's talk presentation I've titled Pathways Around Architecture rather than in Architecture. And I'm probably less interested in trying to redefine the role of the architect from within the profession, but more so looking at the skills that we learn in architecture in school and how they can apply to the built environment more broadly. So after 5 years of study, I came up with this diagram. And although it's quite simplistic, I think I was interested in the position of architecture or the architect within the realisation of projects and where we actually have agency within the built form. And looking at things that precede the architect. And what would happen if we reintroduced ourselves further up the line to create more agency in the project? So after I graduated, I teamed up with a friend of mine who's a landscape architect, and we actually tested this out. So we found one of the most political projects in Melbourne at the time. And it was the elevation of an existing train line. It was dubbed the Skyrail. And basically it was a Labor won the election with the promise that they were going to remove all the level crossings. And through that, they were going to elevate this train line. What we were interested in was what would the space become underneath it, and how could the local communities actually leverage this response and force the government to do something good below this train line. So we created an identity and a website. It's called Left Under. And we basically just pamphlet dropped all the local residents. So the train line went across 9 kilometres in total, and was going to create 225,000 metres squared of public space below it. And so we created this platform, which was basically a community engagement platform that asked the local residents what they wanted that space to become. And this was this was against the government's approach, which wasn't actually engaging with the community. So we saw this as an opportunity for the community to actually do something quite good underneath this train line. The built environment community were into the idea, and we got a lot of press around it. But the local community, and I mean this is a small group, but they were a bit more suspicious about our motives, which I think is quite telling. So we were dubbed a government-funded organisation or unemployable grads, and I think it's quite telling for how the public recognise architects, and why would a group of young architects get involved this far up from a project where they haven't really been invited into it. So from that project, we didn't want to be known as the guys that look under elevated train lines. So we created a new identity, and we called this Office. And this was in response to, I guess, leaving ourselves the flexibility to practice how we wanted to. So it's a pretty broad term. And we're interested in how the structure of a practice can set up the type of work that you do. So I won't go into too much detail, but Office is a not-for-profit, so a company limited by guarantee. And basically that means that we have a board of directors that oversee any project that we do. We're also a registered charity, and we're registered with the Architectural Board of Victoria. But what governs the types of projects that we do is the Constitution, and this is a legally binding document that basically sets out what kind of work that we can actually undertake through Office. And so with this Constitution, we had to write out what the clauses were. And again, I won't go through them, but the overarching theme is to use architecture, or the tools of architecture, for the public good. And within this Constitution, we're interested in 4 different poles. So we're interested in building things, construction, research, so we teach out of universities, the discourse, so things like this, adding to the discourse, and then also educating. So started this not-for-profit. It was a public practice, but we didn't really have much knowledge around what the public was, nor the practitioners that were involved in this. So we started a lecture series called The Politics of Public Space, where we invited practitioners, built environment practitioners, to speak within public space to our students at the time, but then also to the public. And what we noticed was the people, so in red are actually practicing architects, and the rest are other practitioners that work within the built environment. So we quickly realized that perhaps architects aren't the only ones working in the city. I mean, we kind of already knew that, but there was other voices that were equally as prominent and probably have more agency in the occupation and formation of cities. So we had criminologists, urban designers, planners, public artists, landscape architects, and then obviously architects as well. So these talks made their way into a publication series with the same name, and this was a way to broaden the discussion as well. So one of our key points of our constitution is to educate the public. So how do you create a permanent record of some of these conversations and then let the broader public actually be educated from them? I've chosen out this chapter because it relays into the next project that I'm going to talk to. But this was from an academic from University of Melbourne called Kate Shaw. She's an urban geographer, and her talk took place in a public housing estate in Carlton, which is a inner city suburb of Melbourne, where she was talking about the public housing renewal program. So this was a program that was introduced by the government in 2017, I'm pretty sure. And basically it's looking at aging public housing estates and the renewal of them through demolition and rebuild. But through this process of demolishing the houses, the residents are relocated, and they tend to be relocated to the outer suburbs of Melbourne. So splitting up communities. So from that one lecture, we became interested in this topic and started to map out all the public housing renewal projects planned in Melbourne. And this is not specific to Melbourne. It's obviously happening in Sydney, and I'm sure that every other major city as well. It's a process of privatisation of public housing, essentially. So we mapped all the sites, and then through that research, started to quickly understand that there'd never been a refurbishment study put on these ageing public houses, which is quite typical of any architectural project. You get a building and you do a study on it if you could retain it, and if not, then you look at demolishing and rebuilding. Again, similar to that Left Under project, we created an identity and called it Retain, Repair, Reinvest. And this has 3 key points. The first is just to retain the existing communities. The second is repair, which is repair the existing buildings to reduce carbon emissions. And then the third is reinvest. So any savings that's done through that is reinvested back into the public housing estates. So rather than looking at the 9 estates that we had identified, there's through actually a Save Public Housing Collective that we got in touch with the local residents from this estate. So this is Ascot Vale Estate, built in the 1940s and consists of 47 brick 3-storey walk-ups. And so we're working with the local residents there to undertake a refurbishment study. So these are some photos of this estate taken by Ben Hosking, and there's 5 different designs that are replicated throughout the estate. But as you can see, the building's in quite good condition. They just haven't really been maintained well. On the estate, we identified this building here. You can see in the top left-hand corner, it's been burnt out. This happened about 2.5 years ago. There was a fire in the top apartment and everyone was evacuated, and this flat was never repaired, so no one was ever brought back. The current waiting list in Melbourne for public housing is 120,000 people. So for a block of flats to sit empty is quite problematic. Part of the estate has already been demolished and rebuilt, So this diagram shows the number one here is the northern part of the estate, which was demolished, and they are building new apartments there at the moment. And down the bottom shows the case study site. So again, our team's quite small and didn't have the capacity to look at every single building on the estate. So we took one building as the case study, understanding that that design's replicated throughout the estate as well. And what we're interested in was comparing the new build to a refurbishment study. And we're interested in not only comparing it against what we kind of traditionally see as requirements, so performance requirements or costs, but also uncaptured costs. So there's things that generally aren't accounted for in a design and rebuild situation. So the relocation costs of the residents, the health and educational costs that occur to residents that are pulled away from the community, loss of heritage, and then also loss of the public land as well. And so this is our proposal. So you can see that the building fabric hasn't changed, but there's more interventions on this building. So we've replaced all the glass, all the glazing with double glazing units, retractable sunshades on the northern facade, some landscape works around the building to create privacy, and then a rooftop, covered rooftop area as well. This is from the back, so you can see a lift core was introduced into the old stairway. This is a rooftop that I was talking about. So we introduced covered area, communal gardens. There's a barbecue here as well, but this is the communal side of the existing building, and an internal view. We're interested in passive techniques of cooling and heating. So obviously the building is orientated in the right direction, but things like introducing a ceiling fan and then converting everything from gas to electricity as well. And so what we found through this study was there was huge cost savings in refurbishment, and there was huge environmental savings as well. The easiest, so we teamed up with SGS Economics, who are economists, and they were able to quantify some of those educational and health costs that I was talking about. But I think the easiest one to understand is the simple construction costs as well. So demolition and rebuild is about 460,000 per dwelling, and a refurbishment is about 180,000 per dwelling. And that's per dwelling. So if you time that over the whole estate, it's kind of huge savings. Through simple things such as introducing new double glazed windows, we're able to reduce energy use by 38%. And then also through not demolishing and rebuilding, we're able to create a 875% saving in embodied energy as well. So again, we went to the media with this. This was a story that was done in The Age. This is Claire, one of the residents, and also a key person that we were dealing with in this study. And then also produced this advocacy document. So documenting the findings, we're conscious that we couldn't be aligned to any political parties because we wanted to be seen as independent, which we are. But the document could be used by whoever wanted to use it. And then this is a photo of the site from about 2 weeks ago. We had a phone call from Claire, the resident, saying that they're putting up fencing around the block of flats that we're looking at. And then we were like, oh, they're not going to demolish it. Surely not. There's a state election coming up next month. A week later, the scaffolding went up. And so I drove out there and just asked a builder what was going on. And he told us that they were refurbishing it. And so then wrote an email to the Homes Victoria, who are the government body doing this works, and they confirmed that it's going to be retained as public housing, which is like a huge win for the local community and a success for the outcome. So it was never our intention to actually do these works. It was just to force the government's hand into taking responsibility for it. So obviously 10 minutes isn't long enough to talk about this stuff, but I just wanted to finish on this diagram again, and just perhaps for you to consider the role of the architect in the built environment, and perhaps how we can insert ourselves in different areas that aren't just about building buildings, and perhaps sometimes that's more beneficial for communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. That's so insightful, and it's so lovely to see kind of the way that you think and the way that you talk about these projects, and the kinds of influences you can have as an architect in those other kind of lines that you've drawn on. It's really amazing. Let's say I'll ask the same thing I asked to Dave and Graham. Let's say a student wants to go into looking into those other three kind of facets of the world, the built environment, and how they can look in those different lenses. I guess is what you can say. What advice would you give to students wanting to follow that direction, that pathway?
I think first of all, like this office as a practice is an experiment. Like I don't think it's like we're working it out as we go. Like I wouldn't, maybe give me a few more years and then I might recommend it to people. It's tough work. I think just reconsider what the skills you learn at architecture school can be used for. Because I think, I mean, I mentioned at the start that like I think a lot of the conversations we have get caught up in this trying to redefine the role of the architect within the profession, whereas I think a lot of the skills that we learn can be applied to other professions, and perhaps that's a more constructive way to think about it, and can create more agency as well working in the built environment, and to have those conversations. So like most of the interesting conversations that we have tend to not be with architects either. So like talking to a criminologist about this bollards in public space, or like a planner about planning overlays. Like I think they can have real, they can bring a greater awareness to the city than talking to another architect can.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we kind of do ask ourselves this question, like what is an architect, and what's the responsibility of an architect, and what's not the responsibility of the architect. And it's a blurry line, really, isn't it? Because we're masters of everything, or masters of none, but we have knowledge of a bunch of things. So let's say let's look at politics, for example, in architecture, and how do you think architecture fits into the world of politics? And obviously, you said that office doesn't lean towards any party, and which I think is fantastic. So how do you feel like architecture can play a role in driving the decisions that are being made? So how can students be part of that, I guess, and then becoming emerging architects as well?
Yeah, I think well, I think everything we do is political. Like I don't think anyone that says a building isn't political is, I think, wrong. So I think being aware of that and understanding the responsibility that when you are designing buildings or thinking about the city, you have a responsibility to the public. But then using your work to advocate for change as well. Like I think the public housing stuff that we're looking at, the intention was like, we never thought that the outcome would be that they would do the project. The outcome for us was always just to prove them wrong. And if it was just in a document that could be used by residents to advocate for the retention of the home, that was enough for us. So, yeah, I think, to not get fixated on a built outcome, there's other ways to create change and advocate for that as well.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, that was. I hope that any students here have any questions or any kind of even ideas that they'd like to put past Simon. Is there anyone in the chat that would like to ask any questions? No, how about yourself, Mike?
Look, great work you're doing. Looks of things on. Really admirable. One question: how do you get the lights on?
Yeah. So yeah, we've got paid jobs as well. That one we got a small grant to do, which like we ran through in the first month. So that was Yeah, we're working on that project for 7 months, I think, and obviously relied on a lot of other practitioners to work for free as well. But yeah, like we've got paid projects as well. So we do obviously a lot of research. We do traditional projects like shop fit outs for other charities, not for profits. We do a lot of public art with artists. So yeah, I think, yeah, again, like 10 minutes isn't enough to talk about the type of work we do. And I probably chose the most architectural project that we do. But yeah, so the guy I run the practice with, Steve, he's a landscape architect as well. So the range of work that we do kind of follows the money sometimes as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Simon, so much for your time. Obviously, stay on. Mike will speak next, and then we'll kind of wrap up at the end and talk all together.
Yeah.
Good idea. Thank you so much. All right, Mike, it's all yours.
Sure, I'll chuck my share tray in. So the best till last, is that right, Rain?
If you'd like to call it that, yes, of course.
So I'm not sure if I've completely missed the mark here of what we're presenting about, but
that's okay.
I'll have a yarn anyway. Look, I'm presenting you from Mirror country today. So we're in the East Kimberley, Kununurra, about 40 k's away from the WA-NT border. Population about 6,000 people. Yeah, it's incredible country through here. You know, it's the last place on earth you would expect to find substantive architectural practice, that's for sure. So look, I'm going to give a little bit of a spiel about philosophy. I'm going to delve into just a bit about me and how I've kind of become one of Australia's most remote architects. So I guess picture this, an idyllic block overlooking the vast ocean expanses, leafy green in a city suburb, with great walkable amenities nearby, all the necessary services, underground power, potable water, deep sewer, tidy, respectful neighbours. And to top this scenario off, envisage clients that are wealthy, well-spoken and respected professionals who have a substantive budget for the new house. Right, now let's imagine the opposite scenario, a newly developed area, laid in Pindan and Spinifex, miles from a major town, just a few metres off a trucking route, stray dogs and anyone's brave enough to dart between the shade. The amenities are questionable and sometimes the water comes out brown. There's substantive overcrowding and the neighbours humbug carry on all hours. Some places agency is allocated a menial sum to build some social housing for a frail, elderly, abused person who looks after most of the neighbourhood. The reality is the first scenario is the one where we'll see the most substantive architectural input. But is this a scenario that deserves it? I guess this is the sort of question that really kicks off lots of our projects in the practice. And it really leads us to the point. We need architects where there are none. So, So this is the philosophy I take in life. The best view of the city is in the rearview mirror. I know you'll probably disagree with me there, Simon, but the best view is in the rearview mirror. So a bit about me. I'm a registered architect and founder of East Kimberley Design. I'm 34, have a young family, an amazing wife and Megan, and my daughter Miriam. EKD is one of the largest practices above the 26th parallel. We operate out of 3, soon to be 4, pending, fingers crossed, locations, with the largest office being in Kununurra. So we're about 3,000 k's away from Perth, 1,000 k's away from Darwin, from Broome, and about 850 k's away from Darwin. So the old Bunnings sausage sizzle is a fair old drive away, eh? We provide services for Aboriginal corporations, not-for-profits, and government agencies. They're the agencies that kind of top up our coffers so we can do all our social work, if that makes sense. As a colleague once said to me, don't work with people's own money. And that's, if there's anything I've learned, that's quite a good philosophy, particularly in commercial architecture. Our work is unique. We travel long hours, vast distances, and struggle with finding people to build, poor internet. But, you know, no two jobs are ever the same. We've done everything from cattle loading ramps, right the way through to hospital upgrades, single houses through to multi-unit master planning. So no two projects are even remotely similar. I focus on lifestyle for myself and our guys. Our commute to work is very short. I mean, you know, the longest commute that one of our staff members do is 3 minutes. And dogs and lack of shoes are encouraged in our office. I love where I live, bush TV on the evenings, time on the river on the weekends, and balanced waterfalls to explore. The benefits of remote living definitely outweigh the challenges for me and my young family. So where did I come from? Next one now. So that's me in the middle there. That was me living my very best FIFO life. Best way to earn money, let's put it that way, not architecture. So I've done my fair share of career sampling. I've done most jobs on site, from making bricks, through laying them, digging holes, through supervising the whole site. I come from a low SES area in Perth and North Queensland, where there was a lot of pressure to earn over learn. Luckily, my rebellious nature made me do the opposite of what everyone else said to do, which was study rather than work. So after taking some time between school and uni, I actually started out studying engineering. So I couldn't sit down. I was a little ADHD little kid. If it was more than 5 minutes, I was doing well. Hence the reason why I didn't even attempt architectural study, even though it was a strong interest of mine. I finally landed a pathway through my studies, which let me do work, research, and walk through the bush. Surveying was a nice mix for me. I worked in that industry for 10 years, doing FIFO, and then working right the way through to project management on large resource and projects. I spent most of my 20s in the Pilbara region on large research projects. However, after a relationship breakdown and flight over the goldfields, if you've ever flown over the goldfields, it's like potholes of just mining everywhere. I decided that the money wasn't worth it, and the environmental destruction that I was part of, I should avoid. I should hold my values in higher esteem. So, nice little happy snap of me in there in London. London calling. After becoming disillusioned with environmental destruction, the resources sector, I packed my bags and my life into a suitcase and moved to London to work as a project manager and site engineer. I began sketching again, and despite the claustrophobic nature of the city, I began embracing how the fabric of buildings shaped my life. On a sporadic trip to Los Angeles to visit a friend for Thanksgiving, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to a now friend whose dad owned the Chemosphere by John Lautner. With some gentle encouragement from my friends, a few kind words, I knew at that point that's where I was headed. I needed to go back to architecture. After briskly completing the master's course and trying not to be the creepy mature age student who asks lots of questions, I thought maybe luxurious houses in LA was going to be my jam. You know, I had the connections there. It seemed like it was all lined up, ready to go. After working with the wealthy, I decided perhaps this isn't for me. I struggled with actually finding employment when I left uni. Nobody wanted an old career change guy who, you know, has multiple degrees and has done everything in terms of construction site. They want someone they can mold to their own accord. So with my wife and I both pinning for country life, we decided now is the time to move north. My wife, having resided in Broome for many years, was keen to head back with her husband in tow, and I saw more of the opportunities for career development in Darwin. Well, as you have it, we land smack bang in the middle, Kununurra, right in the middle of those two places. A job offer for her she couldn't refuse, and a cushy government job for me. I thought that was us. Missed a slide. Being in a small town, I thought there was zero opportunity for a practice up here. You know, otherwise someone would have created a firm up here, right? You know, how wrong I was, you know. 6 months into living in the town, I was given an opportunity for a commission that would launch my own practice. After much deliberation, I finally made the first career move of my life that followed my heart, not my head. Hence East Kimberley Design. So this was the first project we did, an NDIS centre in Panara. Just because someone has said it's previously unviable doesn't mean it isn't now. We just need to look at it with different eyes. You know, the world has changed substantially in the last 10 years. I was never going to fit in the 96, the city. I was once told by another architect I would never make it in architecture because I wanted to go home early and spend time with my family. You know, I thought that was ridiculous. You know, that whole mentality of, you know, work your guts out, you know, do overtime all the time. I'd like to think that our practice, that you have your cake and eat it. Whilst we're certainly not as profitable as the architect who told me that, we are sustainable and we're helping the community. That's it. That's my presentation. Any questions from anyone?
Yeah, everyone, please put questions. Don't be shy. This is the conversation. That's what we always say. Yeah, I guess maybe I'll ask you the same question I've been asking. So let's say a student would like to become the most regional architect in the world, in Australia, let's say. What do you feel like the pathway, or what kind of advice do you give them if they want to take that route?
Pick up the phone, call a regional practice, do it. You know, there's people, I'm sure unless you've been living under a rock, there's a shortage of staff everywhere, you know, and regional practices, we struggle to attract people to come in, you know, but the opportunities that you get are far outweigh practices in the city. We're the ones who are responsible for our projects. We unfortunately, you know, for better or worse, we get bailed up at Coles and told, you know, that project you did was terrible. Or the opposite, we get told, oh, it was fantastic, I'm glad you did that. So there's a higher level of social responsibility if you do want to move into regional architecture. You know, you're not just responsible for, you know, a faceless office fit out that no one's ever going to see you about. It's consistent, you know. If there's one thing you learn, it's a 24-hour job.
Wow. Okay. Well, we've got 2 questions in the well, 3 now. So can you give us an example of types of projects you get to work on? Mike, I think this is Mike.
Yep. Like I said, anything from cattle loading ramps right the way through to hospitals. We're doing so many diverse different things. I don't really know how to answer that. If it's in the Kimberley, we'll probably do it.
Fantastic. That's amazing. So yeah, literally rural architecture is everything.
Yeah. We have obviously we're a practice of 5-6 people. So there is a limit of what you can deliver, but you know, we do partner with larger firms when it does become too substantive for us, but that's not really that often.
Fantastic.
I saw a little note that came up that said, how do you compete with city firms? That's a fantastic question. So it's funny because at the moment, you almost have, what's the word, how do I put this? You don't have as much competition because the city firms are too busy in the city. And as soon as the work dries up in the city, that's when you'll see the city-based architects coming up here and trying to, you know, win the jobs up here per se. But in saying that, we can, you know, we might be slightly more expensive in terms of our fee structures and things like that, but the way we explain it to our clients is their disbursements are nowhere in the realm of, you know, what a city firm would cost to come up and inspect the site. We compared fees with another practice recently, and they were charging 10 grand to just visit site in Halls Creek. You know, we do that drive in a day and see the site. So you know, we might be more expensive on that side, but if you're paying 10 grand for each site, that adds up pretty quick. So we have to be dynamic and have lots of different locations so we can just pop the site. So yeah, we've got an office in Columbaroo, Kununurra, and then we've got our, what I like to call wet season office. So when it gets hot and everything shuts down, we've got an office in Fremantle as well. So.
Nice. Very, very cool. Maybe this next question from Emmy, I feel like can be for both of you guys. So if you were both hiring, what would you be looking for in a prospective hire? What gives a graduate the edge over the others for regional practices or for the practices you're working on?
Ability to document.
Ability to document.
Yep. Lots of people think that, you know, flash renders and that kind of stuff are really going to pop out, and they do look nice, but the practical side of things is that's this much of the work you do compared to this much. As a hirer, you want to see basically that people understand how to build and understand how to make site directions and things like that. You know, it's one thing to be able to do pretty pictures, but that doesn't pay the bills.
Good answer. Nice. How about yourself, Simon?
It's a tough question. I think just an interest in architecture, like an actual interest, not just I totally agree with Mike about the balance between work and lifestyle. But I think just being able to be interested to go and see buildings and understand architecture and materiality and how things go together is, I think, important to joining a practice and learning in that practice as well. So not only what you're learning at university, but going out and exploring, if it is remote country or the city, going and looking at buildings and experiencing those spaces and seeing how things go together, I think is really important.
We spend a lot of time doing like post-occupancy evaluations and things like that, just to understand what works and what doesn't. And there's definitely been commissions that I've turned down because I've seen so many follies be constructed up here that architects will be approached. They'll say, "Do you want to build this project?" And there's not actually a need for it. You know, there's so much of that up here. And a big part of our practice, we try and encourage our guys, is to speak to people. Actually go out on the ground and talk to people. There's such a skill in being able to pick up the phone and talk to people that, you know, is so important in the work that we do. You know, I would add that on top of the documentation is the ability to pick up the phone and talk to people or go out in country and, you know, not be afraid to have a yarn to people and, you know, drive around and see what has and hasn't worked. There's so much of that that gets missed when you don't live in the place, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. I think that this next question by Ellen is saying, how would you demonstrate an actual interest in architecture and urban interest in, like, let's say, a job application? So exactly looking for, give us the formula. But I feel like is it more than just in the way that you speak? I guess in the way that you present yourself. Is it something that do you feel like it should come naturally? Like, what do you think the approach should be?
Well, I don't think you can't fake it. It's like anything, like knowing the and this is from a Melbourne context, but just like the weird public space in that part of the city, or the bar with that weird materiality, or it's like going and being part of the place that you're living in and actually experiencing it. And that can be through like an architectural lens. So like knowing it in terms of its materiality or construction or how people use that space. But then it's also just like a cultural sense as well. It's just like actually enjoying and experiencing the place that you're living in or the place that you're visiting as well.
I would probably have to have bit of a different approach to Simon, just the way that we operate as well. You know, I wouldn't hire someone whose only interest was architecture. It's not sustainable, not up here. You know, they need to be interested in going out bush, going out camping, go full driving, go fishing. You know, there's so much more to your life than just architecture. You know, we harp on in these forums, you know, perpetually, like, oh, you know, I want to show that I'm the best architect and that sort of thing, where we really should be focusing on, are you the best human?
I agree.
No, that's really lovely. That is really lovely. That's a great way of saying, are you the best human? It's just kind of, do you feel like it is about really being yourself within that situation? Because I feel like we think so much about like, how do I come across, and should I be this way, or should I be saying this, and should I make a script for my interview, and should I, because it is quite a nerve-wracking experience, and I guess some people might expect quite a lot from this one kind of opportunity to kind of make a first impression. So yeah, what was your experiences like, I guess, you going into those, like, you know, writing up your CV and making and starting a conversation about your work?
Actually, before we started broadcasting this, I think Mike was saying that he did some bricklaying, and I said that I'd done some plasterboarding, like working on building sites. And I remember, yeah, it was a job interview, and I had that on my CV, as well as like working at an architectural practice. And the guy employing me would just want to talk about gyprocking, and like that was a real point of difference. Because I think just like having a skill set or an appreciation to construction, or something that sits outside of what we get taught in architecture school, is, I think, a good thing to have, and a life skill as well. Like, whether that's going to London like Mike did, like, I mean, I went to South America for a year. Like, I think having those things on your CV as well will create a point of difference, which, yeah, most practices would love that, I think.
Yeah, thank you for your perspective on that, for both of you. I think that's kind of like the question on everybody's minds as a student. It's just, how do I get work, and how do I kind of put myself out there and make sure that I'm getting the right experiences and things like that. So yeah, thank you for that perspective. We have Aomi here. A question for you, Simon. So much of Office's projects appear to be highly collaborative. How did you go about approaching and engaging the public or other professionals in some of your projects, such as the politics of public space?
Just an email, cold emails. Yeah, I think probably ties back to that question you had before. Like, a lot of people overthink these things, but I mean, everyone's so generous with their time, especially in the built environment. You can just email people, and more often than not, they'll reply. And if they don't, then it doesn't really matter. So yeah, the politics of public space, no one charged for their time, and the majority of people we'd never talked to before. So it was just a cold email to see if they wanted to be involved and be part of the broader conversation.
Lovely. Easy as that. Awesome. So if you want to be a collaborator, send out an email. Why not? Question for Simon. Do you feel an architecture degree covers the basics of understanding the more complex issues in regards to the influence of architecture, to understanding the power policy plays over architecture, and or how the architect can affect change beyond design? What is the one thing you would change in the education of architects? Great question.
No, like, and I think that's why we collaborate so much, is because we don't assume to be the expert at anything, and there are other professions that do what we say we do and probably do it better. So by having those collaborations and relying on expertise of other professionals, I think you can always get a better outcome. I think like the best skill that we have as architects is being able to like project manage, like coordinate a lot of different people and have a little bit of knowledge of a lot of things, but not really be the expert of anything. So I think, yeah, like collaboration is hugely important in constructing a building, but then also doing projects like we are, which is like relying on an economist to quantify health impacts or researchers to do some of the studies on the housing policy and things like that. So again, it's like not assuming that we know everything, I think is because we don't.
Totally, 100%. How about yourself, Mike? What would you, what is it? What is the one thing you would change in the education of architects?
Oh, so many things. I guess for me, just to be purely, regionally specific and selfish, is the delivery and procurement of projects. It's so diverse, and the regions is just, it's the challenges. I don't know, I guess just a bit more of a less city focus, but from our perspective, would be good.
Totally.
Take people out bush and on country and just get them to understand things a bit clearer. Yeah.
Totally. Oh, here we go. Katie Tay with the big questions. When jobs didn't come about and you were challenged to sustain financially, have you ever encountered moments when you questioned your decision to choose this pathway, and what keeps you going?
Every day. I mean, let's put it this way: if you like money, don't be an architect, or be an architect with no social conscience. Take a pick. Take a pick. I mean, it's what people don't realize is running a practice is about this much design and about this much trying to get the next job.
Wow.
We're lucky where we are because we have a solid pipeline of government work, but I don't know how practices in Melbourne and Sydney and Perth, Fremantle, wherever, keep their doors open. It's so cutthroat, and that's why I don't want to run a practice down there.
Hey, what was the question again? How do you pay bills?
What keeps you going? So have you ever thought about, like, why did I choose this pathway, and what keeps you going, kind of like what keeps you pushing forward in what you're doing?
What keeps me going? I guess knowing that I could just quit at any time is good. Having I'm in like a pretty fortunate position. Like I'm healthy. Like I don't have like any debt except for my HECS debt. Rent's cheap. Don't have children, so like I can live pretty cheaply. So
that's expensive.
yeah. But if any of those things change, then I'd have to reconsider what I'm doing from a financial position for sure. But I mean, for the moment, it's fine, and I mean, it's interesting. Like I'd hate to know what I'm doing next week. Like I think that's the great thing about running your own practice is that every day is different, and while it is stressful, you don't know where the next job's going to come in. It's also kind of exciting that it's not planned either.
Totally, yeah. It's a risky business.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's I bet that I guess you do what you do because you really do love it, and yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing. So Rebecca's asking, to Mike, in working in Indigenous communities, what have been some of the most rewarding / challenging experiences you've had working with different cultures and perspectives?
Yeah, look, good question. Look, it's always rewarding to work in those communities because there's such a need. We do plenty of pro bono stuff throughout various communities. The most challenging part is actually it'd be a combination of multiple things, but actually getting things built, trying to find builders who are willing to go out there is always challenging, and scheduling in with wet season rains, logistics is a massive part of what we do, but also the lack of what's the word? The native title issues have just never been solved, and they cause issues for traditional owners. For us, we're always a huge part of our practice is actually working out, how we can build stuff on native title land for native title holders. It's not a simple process, and unfortunately, lots of these places where there's communities and towns, they're actually the meeting point of three or four different groups. It's not as clear cut as what we make it out to be. Particularly in the registered native title maps and things like that. They say, oh, this is the boundary of this area, when it's kind of overlapping. So that's probably the most challenging thing. Culturally, I mean, like I was saying before, if you're a good human, you're a good human. We employ ALOs for certain jobs. That's an Aboriginal liaison officer. I believe we're the only practice who do that. We also employ linguists on occasion, so we can actually make sure we're conveying the message and that everyone's voice is being heard. And the places we get to see and go to and people we meet is incredible. Our practice, rather than put up pictures of all the projects we've done for every single site, we collect a painting from that community. So just as kind of that's our reward for going out to site and doing that kind of work. Yeah. In amongst the satisfaction of seeing those projects go ahead.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mike and Simon. I believe we have gone over time, so I'll ask one last question that I did ask Dave and Graham. What is an important piece of advice that somebody gave you throughout your journey to now, and what is something you'd like to lay back to students and let them know, amongst all the other great things that you've kind of spoken about today?
I feel like I'm the wrong person to ask that question. Don't know, just like don't overthink things, especially applying for jobs and reaching out to people. Like I think, I don't know if Mark's the same, but if students email me, like I reply to them all the time. Like if the architect that you're applying for or the person that you want to approach won't reply an email, they're probably not the right person to work for anyway. So I think just don't overthink those things and just put yourself out there and something will happen. Yeah.
I've got a stack of rejection letters. People that didn't want to hire me. I know I have a beer and have a yarn to them at the next, institute event. It's a tough industry, but my best piece of advice is don't make friends with architects. Make friends with people who aren't architects, because they're the ones who are going to give you the work. An architect's not going to hire another architect. Whereas a developer, they'll hire an architect.
Interesting. Oh, all right.
If you're still at uni, go down to the uni tavern or wherever kids hang out nowadays, and go make friends with the guys who are studying planning and finance and medicine and all that kind of stuff, because they're going to be your clients.
That is a really good piece of advice. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's basically don't take things too seriously, really.
Yeah.
It is a it is quite stressful, and just going out of uni, like I'm finishing uni in 3 weeks, and I'm kind of like, oh God, what's going to happen next? And that kind of puts you at ease a little bit when you guys kind of have that perspective. a few years into your, I guess, journey as an architecture. So yeah, thank you both so much for this lovely chat. I hope, and I probably know that a bunch of students already here have learned quite a bit during this time. And yeah, we really appreciate all the, you know, taking your time out of your day to come and say hi and speak about what you're doing. You both have amazing, I guess you both have amazing jobs. And I hope that some people are inspired to kind of follow those paths or follow their own path. So yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Of course,
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. All right, I guess we'll see you when we see you.
Good day. All right.
Thanks.
Take
See you
care.
later.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.